everyone! This time I'm bringing you an interesting episode about the Ikiryo, a type of spirit that comes not from a dead person but a living one. This term needs no explanation in Japan because everyone knows it and most fully believe in it. I'll first explain what an Ikiryo is, then move on to how it affects people. Finally, I'll be sharing a few true stories that involve this type of spirit, so I hope you have time to listen till the end. There are so many good stories out there, so I couldn't put them all in, but I'll sprinkle them into future episodes. If you're impatient, I've put timestamps in the description box below so you can skip ahead to the parts you want to listen to. If you haven't subscribed yet and you like creepy stories from Japan, that's what this channel is all about, so make sure you subscribe. Now, sit back and relax, and let's get right into it. The history and types of Ikiryo. Ikiryo, also known as Shoryo, Seirei, or Ikisudama, is a disembodied spirit or ghost in Japanese popular belief and fiction that leaves the body of a living person and subsequently haunts other people or places, sometimes across great distances. The terms are used in contrast to Shiryo, which refers to the spirit of those who are already deceased. The popular belief that the human spirit or soul can escape from the body has been around since early times, with eyewitness accounts and experiences such as hauntings, possessions, out-of-body experiences reported in anecdotal and fictional writings. Vengeful spirits, or onryo of the living, are said to inflict curses upon the subject or subjects of their vengeance by transforming into their Ikiryo form. It is believed that if a sufficient grudge is held, all part of the perpetrator's soul leave the body, appearing in front of the victim to harm or curse them, a concept not so dissimilar from the evil eye. The Ikiryo has even made its way into Buddhist scriptures, where they are described as living spirits who, if angered, might bring about curses even just before their death. Possession is another means by which the Ikiryo are commonly believed to be capable of inflicting harm, the possessed person thought to be unaware of this process. However, according to mythology, the Ikiryo does not necessarily act out of spite or vengefulness, and stories are told of the Ikiryo who bears no grudge or poses no real threat. In recorded examples, the spirit sometimes takes possession of another person's body for motives other than vengeance, such as love and infatuation. A person's Ikiryo may also leave the body, often very shortly before death, to manifest its presence around loved ones, friends, and/or acquaintances. Sightings of Ikiryo belonging to those whose deaths are imminent have been recorded from all over Japan. Stories abound of spirits that materialize or otherwise manifest their presence to someone dear to them, such as immediate family. The recipient of the visit experiences a metaphysical foreshadowing of this person's death before any tangible news of bereavement arrives. Many of the local terms for the Ikiryo were collected by Kunio Yanagita and his school of folklorists. The Yamabito, sometimes also called Tobidamashi or Omokage, are believed to depart from the body and walk around, sometimes making noises like that of the door sliding open. Yanagita defines this as the ability of certain people to traverse the world in their Ikiryo form. Such individuals are purported to have voluntary control of this ability, in contrast to those who are only temporarily capable of tapping into such a state as a precursor to their death. They can assume the form of a living human, that is to say, it has feet and make pitter-patter noises, unlike the stereotypical Japanese ghost that have no legs or feet. In the Tono region of Iwate Prefecture, a beautiful girl aged 16 or 17, critically ill with typhoid fever, was seen wandering around the construction site of the Koganji Temple days before her death. There are cases where the wandering Ikiryo appear as floating soul flames, known in Japan as the Hitodama or Hidama. However, a soul flame from a person who is near death is not considered unusual, with the traditional conception among Japanese people being that the soul escapes the body several days either before or after death. One case of hitodama speaks of an individual who saw one and pursued it ruthlessly. He discovered the owner of the soul, who claimed to have seen the entire experience of being chased during a dream. Another story is about a person who worked at the town office of Tono City, Iwate Prefecture. One night, he reported seeing a hitodama emerge from a stable and go into the house's entrance where it was flying around. He claimed to have chased it with a broom and trapped it beneath a bucket. A while after, he was rushed out to see his sick uncle on the brink of death, but he made sure to release the hitodama from its trapping. He soon learned that his uncle had only just died, but he came back to life again just enough to accuse the nephew of chasing him with the broom and capturing him. Similarly, the folklore archives of Umedoi in Mie Prefecture tells a tale of a band of men who, late in the night, spotted and chased a hitodama into a sake warehouse, waking a maid who was asleep inside. The maid later professed to being pursued by many men and fleeing to take refuge in the warehouse. Ikiryo as an illness. During the Edo period, from 1603 to 1868, there was a belief that there was a condition called rikonbyo, where the soul would not just separate from the body, but assume the shape and appearance of the sufferer. The condition was also known as kage no yamai or kage no wazudai. The identical double might be seen by the sufferer or be witnessed by others and can be classed as a doppelganger phenomenon. Others have reported a sort of out-of-body experience whereby their consciousness inhabits the Ikiryo to see their own lifeless body. The Ushino Kokumairi is when one, in the hour of the ox, 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., strikes a nail in a sacred tree and thus becomes an oni, which is a kind of demon or ogre, and using these oni powers would inflict curses and calamity upon arrival. Although many Ikiryo generally are spirits of humans that leave the body unconsciously and move about, deeds akin to performing magic rituals and intentionally tormenting a target can also be interpreted as Ikiryo. Negative effects of Ikiryo and how to rid yourself of it. Although there are types of Ikiryo that are harmless, this channel is much more interested in the ones that have negative effects on other people. In the modern day, when Japanese people hear this term, it automatically has a negative connotation. In essence, Ikiryo arise when an individual's strong emotions and thoughts become attached to their guardian spirit. Negative obsessions such as hatred and jealousy, deformed feelings of love such as that of a stalker, or wishing misfortune upon someone, such as wishing the other person to get into an accident, to get ill, or even die. These types of emotions causes the Ikiryo to attach themselves to the person in which these thoughts are directed towards. It might be difficult to wrap your head around it, but this phenomenon actually does exist. Once it exceeds the person's threshold to keep it within themselves, that energy escapes from their physical body in the form of a ball of negative energy. There are people who can send their Ikiryo consciously, but most of the time it occurs unconsciously. That is, the person with these obsessive feelings has no idea that they've created an Ikiryo that has now attached themselves to their target. There are 5 characteristics that make an individual more prone to becoming, for a lack of a better word, the attacker. Number 1. A person who is highly emotional and easily irritated. People who get angry easily are generally aggressive towards others. Many of them have a strong tendency to punish others and don't hesitate to hurt others to get what they want. Sometimes they do this without even realizing it. Thus, sometimes their Ikiryo does the job for them. They also have a hard time digesting their feelings of anger, so they allow it to accumulate, which eventually turns into strong feelings of resentment. Number 2. A person who has a high dependency on others and jealousy towards others. This is especially dangerous for people who tend to be extremely jealous or attached to one person whom they have decided is the one. Strong emotions are not dispersed and are poured into one individual, making it easier for their spirits to fly. Among human emotions, resentment and jealousy have very strong negative energy. The more negative energy accumulates, the more it will lead to the generation of Ikiryo, so people who tend to get attached to others should be careful. Number 3. A person who is very negative. If you tend to think, "I'm nothing anyway," it's more likely to lead to jealousy and resentment towards others. Sometimes we unconsciously send out our Ikiryo due to our accumulated feelings of jealousy. Also, somewhere deep down, there's a desperate thought of, "I don't care what happens to me." The spirit that sacrifices itself and flies away has very strong power and may lead the other party into great misfortune. People who tend to think negatively about everything may need to be conscious of thinking positively from time to time. Number 4. A person who is always seeking other people's approval. These days, we have more opportunities to share information about ourselves to an unspecified number of people through social media, but many people have an abnormally strong desire to be recognized by others. Take those who want to be influencers and who already are influencers. Having a strong desire for someone to accept you can lead to a strong attachment to others. Be careful if you're aware that your desire for approval is strong, as attachment can cause your Ikiryo to appear. Number 5. A person who is selfish and doesn't care about other people's misfortunes. Even if they have strong emotions, people who don't have ill wish towards others will have a lower chance of attacking others with their Ikiryo. However, people who don't care about hurting others are the complete opposite. Even their Ikiryo will become aggressive and has a real potential to cause great misfortune to the possessed person. You might be thinking right now, this all sounds bloody ridiculous. How in the world can a freaking Ikiryo actually affect me? So now, let me tell you some negative effects an Ikiryo could have on a possessed individual. Number 1. The number of problems increases in your everyday life. Under the influence of the Ikiryo, you may become negative, or you may become irritated by things that normally wouldn't bother you, or you may act in a way that attracts trouble to yourself. Small mistakes and misunderstandings begin to occur frequently, and there's a possibility that you may lose confidence. In this way, the purpose of the Ikiryo is to mentally weaken the targeted person. Number 2. Feeling lethargic and unmotivated. People who are physically active before being possessed by an Ikiryo may lose their motivation as a result of the spirit draining them of their energy and may find themselves unable to work and move as they would like. They may also feel chronically tired and feel unwell. Because it's caused by the influence of an Ikiryo, the cause is not clear even after examinations at the hospital. If they continue to feel unwell for a long period of time and it can't be cured by treatment or medicine, they'll eventually become physically and emotionally drained. Tell me, have you ever felt this way before? Feeling lethargic and unwell without a proper medical reason? Maybe it's because you were being attacked spiritually. Number 3. Strange phenomena occur while you're sleeping. You may start experiencing sleep paralysis where someone's face suddenly appears in front of you. You may have nightmares every day and your sleep will be shallow, ultimately leading to mental and physical damage. Number 4. A persistent state of mental instability for no apparent reason. Even if that person is normally very calm, they become prone to sudden emotional outbursts or become fidgety and restless under the influence of the Ikiryo. They may find themselves crying uncontrollably even though they aren't sad, or may suddenly become overwhelmed with fear or anger. Number 5. Relationships with others will begin to deteriorate. People who have never said anything bad about others suddenly become aggressive or criticize the actions of others. Relationships with the opposite sex often become strained, fights and arguments with current partners increase, and new encounters suddenly disappear. Influenced by the Ikiryo's feelings of envy and resentment, it drives the possessed person to become jealous and dismissive of others. Number 6. A constant feeling of discomfort, almost as if you're not in your actual physical body. To put it simply, an Ikiryo is sort of like a piece of another person's emotions, so you may feel uncomfortable as if the other person is living inside you. Since your life energy continues to be sucked out by them, it's difficult to take action to get rid of it, even if you feel something is wrong. Even if you are possessed by an Ikiryo and you're not certain who's sending it, if you find yourself constantly thinking about one person unnaturally, that person may be the source. Especially if it's a person that you don't really think about very often, and all of a sudden you find yourself thinking about them all the time, and they even start appearing in your dreams, it could be a hint that something is going on there. There's a chance that their Ikiryo is attached to you, so I recommend that you consult someone you trust or go to a specialist. Number 7. A persistent state of neurosis, including hallucinations and auditory hallucinations. Amongst all the states of being possessed I just listed, this one can be said to be a terminal symptom. By being possessed by an Ikiryo for a long period of time, one becomes almost assimilated with it, and one's own consciousness is lost to that of the Ikiryo. This means that you're being brainwashed by the person sending it. When you fall into this state, you begin to resemble the person, such as their mannerisms, the way they talk, and even their food preferences. There's a risk that you'll lose your sense of self and be unable to live your daily life as before, so please seek help from the people you trust at an early stage before this happens. If any of the 7 symptoms I just listed hit a chord with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences, so pop it down in the comments. Also, don't start freaking out if you think you might be possessed. There may be a way to get rid of it. Here are 5 ways on how to do that. Number 1. Try to act dignified. Ikiryos use all means possible to weaken the possessed person's mind and body. If every time something bad happens and you get overly afraid or begin to think negatively, that's exactly what the Ikiryos want from you. Negative feelings can cause it to attach to you even more, so if you remain strong and dignified, you'll be less likely to receive any damage. Number 2. Write down what's happening to you on paper. Being blindly afraid leads to anxiety. By clearly writing it down on paper and recognizing that this is what's happening to me right now, it may bring you some peace of mind. Also, writing it down will help you think about how you can prevent it from happening. I recommend that you try to be proactive. Number 3. Confide in someone you trust. It can be difficult to discuss spiritual matters with others, but it is very reassuring to have someone you can trust who knows about your situation. When the damage from an Ikiryo becomes serious, having someone to talk to may be a chance to rescue yourself. If you have someone who will listen seriously, it would be a good idea to talk to them. Number 4. Wear a bracelet to ward off the Ikiryo. Items decorated with power stones that ward off evil spirits is recommended. The following power stones have a purifying effect and are said to be highly effective in keeping them away. They are crystals including black crystals, amethysts, prenites, and turquoise. Number 5. Consult a priest or a professional psychic. This is the most reliable method among the ones that I've just introduced. You can have your exorcism performed at a shrine, etc., but there are also psychics who can perform an exorcism remotely, such as over the phone, without having to meet in person. Please choose one that suits your situation. In saying that, it's very difficult to exorcise an Ikiryo because they come from living people. Compared to spirits of the dead, their will is much stronger. Amulets are less effective against them, and it is difficult to take countermeasures against them. However, the spirit comes from the grudge and dissatisfaction of the person who's causing it, so if you identify that person and remove that dissatisfaction, it will disappear on its own. In most cases, that's easier said than done. Some people are extremely good at masking their hatred, dissatisfaction, and jealousy. Someone you might think is your best friend or a girlfriend or boyfriend that you broke up with but are on good terms with. These people who are nice and cordial to your face might harbor these nasty feelings. So, as you can imagine, it might be difficult to identify the person who has a grudge against you. Not to mention, if it's coming from a stalker that you've never met, for example, it's going to be impossible to confront that person. But if you do have a clue of who it might be, one solution might be to try to get closer to them so that those feelings towards you disappear. Try to gather information on them and behave in a way that doesn't cause a resentment towards you. If the emotions from the other person diminishes, the Ikiryo will detach itself from you, and at that point you can kick them out of your life. Honestly, it's creepy to think about. Everything in this life is made of energy, and I wholeheartedly believe that a person's thoughts, words, emotions, and spirit all have their own energy field. I believe the majority of Japanese people are highly spiritual and they believe in these things, and that's why the concept of Ikiryo and other types of spirits are spoken about all the time without worrying about the next person thinking if they're crazy. How is it in the country you're from? Does something like this exist there? Do you think this entire concept is just ridiculous, or do you believe it could exist? Alright, so now we've talked about how a person can get affected if an Ikiryo attaches to them. But what happens to the person who is actually the source of it? Because they're sending a part of their soul to another place, there's also damage to them. For example, they may suddenly have trouble concentrating and get distracted easily. No amount of sleep will be enough and they'll be constantly tired. They'll be suffering from an emotional roller coaster. In most cases, they have no idea what they've done. So, this person may become quite worried because these symptoms closely resemble that of depression. Bear with me just a bit more before we go into the true Ikiryo stories. When I listed off the 5 characteristics that make a person prone to creating an Ikiryo, and you felt that some of it described you, work on improving yourself in the following areas. Number 1, gain control of your emotions. Number 2, try to release your stress periodically and don't suppress your anger and unhappiness to the point of overheating your mind. Number 3, increase self-confidence. These 3 points are extremely generic and there are so many ways to improve those aspects within oneself. Take some time to self-reflect and see what would work best for you. Remember, in most cases, Ikiryo are generated subconsciously, so it is impossible to voluntarily prevent yourself from creating one. So instead, it's important to keep your mind and body healthy. Try to let go of strong emotions and obsessions as much as possible and try to remain positive. Alright, here we are. I've gathered some true creepy stories involving Ikiryo to cap this episode off. Now that you know exactly what they are, you'll be able to fully enjoy them. As you listen, think about what you know about the Ikiryo now and see if you can correlate all the previous information and what's happening in the story. Now, let's begin. Story 1. Do you believe in Ikiryo? I saw a show on TV once and they described it as a person's living soul subconsciously attaching itself to someone they hold a grudge against. About 3 years ago, I was dating a man and I was head over heels in love with him. We were very happy together, or at least I thought we were. One day, by chance, I found out that he was cheating on me. That was bad, But what was worse was that he was actually considering marrying her. Not me, but her. I was absolutely clueless about any of this. Was I the one who was the side woman? Although I was in denial and in shock, I put his happiness ahead of mine and accepted the breakup. There was no apology from him whatsoever, not even anger, nor a sense of panic that he had been caught cheating. He was nonchalant about the entire situation. I tried to move on, but my feelings for him gradually turned into resentment. I couldn't get those two out of my head. They were constantly fluttering around in my brain, and before I knew it, my heart was filled with jealousy and hatred. I didn't show it in my face, but I went as far as quitting my job because we were co-workers and I was afraid that he might see straight through me. Even though I put distance between us, my hatred only grew stronger. It wasn't long before he began appearing in my dreams every single night. There were scenes of him in a car, of him walking around in a shopping mall, and so on. On one occasion, I dreamt that I was back at the company where we used to work together. I was hanging out with my colleagues and was relentlessly bitching about him. A few days later, he called me out of the blue and told me to stop spreading spiteful rumors about him. I had no idea what he was going on about at that time because I hadn't met up with any of my colleagues or spoken ill of him to anyone else. And two, I'd completely forgotten about the dream I had had. Another night, I had a dream about the other woman where I was whispering something in her ear. I proceeded to watch and laugh as she got into an argument with my ex. These sorts of dreams kept occurring. A while after quitting my job, I met up with my coworker for the first time in a while, and I found out that my ex and his girlfriend had broken up. Up to that moment in time, I didn't think anything about the dreams that I was having. I assumed they were coming from my stress and fatigue. Nothing more, nothing less. That all changed when one day my ex reached out to me and told me he wanted me back. Upon hearing those words, my anger exploded inside and I thought about how much I wanted to kill him. I hated him. I was so angry, I don't even know how to put it into words. I remember this so vividly. It was about 5 days later that I had another dream. I was sitting on the passenger's side while my ex was driving. He looked really tired and I was sitting next to him feeling so annoyed by his stupid presence. I grabbed the steering wheel and turned it sharply to the right. Then I woke up and just like all the previous times, I immediately forgot about it. This was the last dream I had of my ex. I got a new boyfriend after a while and I didn't think about my ex anymore. I was happy again. And then I heard a rumor. Apparently, my ex had gotten into a car accident and his legs were now paralyzed. He had to quit his job because of it. Reflecting back on all of it, I can admit that I was actually quite mentally unstable and psychotic after my ex and I had broken up. I don't know if my dreams had anything to do with my ex's misfortunes, but I did feel extremely satisfied in causing his car accident in my dream. The fact that the timing of his accident and my dream seemed to match could be a coincidence, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe I had possessed him with my Ikiryo. And that's why I think I know how people feel when they unconsciously send out their Ikiryo to haunt someone else. Story 2. I was out drinking at a pub with my colleague Saiki, and it just so happened that a bunch of my ex-co-workers from my previous company were also having a gathering there. I didn't quit that job because I had gotten into trouble or anything and was still on good terms with everyone there. So although we didn't join them, some of my ex-co-workers came over to our table from time to time to give us some beer and finger food like fried chicken and sashimi. A while later, Saiki started to feel nauseous and we left the pub early. I asked him whether he was okay when he replied, "You know that manager you used to work with? The one who came over to pour some sake for us? He's in a terrible state." "What do you mean?" I asked. "That guy's possessed by 3 Ikiryos. If someone gets possessed by that many, you can't do anything about it. I can see them and it's making me feel sick. I couldn't believe it. Apparently, Psyche was that type of person. Someone who could see spirits and that kind of nonsense. He continued speaking. For example, let's say you meet someone for the first time and you talk to that person for 3 minutes. Or even better, you meet someone for the first time and when you look into their eyes, you instinctively feel disgusted. I'm not talking about the appearance of that person. I'm talking about something deeper, an unnerving feeling that makes you feel super uncomfortable and sick. People like that are usually possessed by something, and I've never seen anyone as possessed as your ex-manager. No one will be able to help that guy. And Ikiryo stems from resentment, from a grudge. I asked, so does that mean there are 3 people out there who are hammering nails into a voodoo doll? Nah, just thinking about a person that way could create an Ikiryo. I heard that those whose Ikiryo have possessed someone has to pay for it in one way or another. Is that true? Not necessarily. Most of the time, they've already paid for it in the form of being sexually harassed or power harassed by the manager. Maybe he's done even worse things that no one can even fathom. His victims have already paid in full by going through all of that. So, you could just wish someone to die and that alone can cause your Ikiryo to possess that person? Yeah, pretty much. It's scary, isn't it? Although I was surprised by Seiki's knowledge and his third eye, I wasn't at all surprised when he told me about the manager. He was a horrible human being, so it made complete sense. Out of curiosity, I asked him whether I had any Ikiryo on me, and he replied, "You've got both your grandparents with you, so make sure you continue to treat old people with respect." I had hoped that maybe an Ikiryo of a young sexy woman was possessing me, but that went right out the window. "Can you see the 3 people that are possessing the manager?" I asked. "Yep, one's a woman. She looks like the quiet type, and it looks like that guy put her through hell," replied Saiki. Come to think of it, the female staff members seem to change almost on a weekly basis. There was a rumor that the manager would fire them straight away if he didn't like them. The second one is a guy. He looks like he's deeply contemplating something. These types of Ikiryo are the worst. These people don't care about their current life anymore and will continue to hold their hatred and grudge against the targeted person forever. They're literally wasting their own life away by choosing to remain in that state. And the third person is you. Well, that certainly caught me off guard, but it's also true that I did wish he would hurry up and die. Saiki is an amazing friend. He's the real deal. He can really see and feel things. Ever since we had this conversation, I now completely believe in the paranormal. Story 3. This happened when I was in middle school. My classmate, a guy, was always being bullied. I always witnessed it happening but never tried to do anything to stop it. One day, I was feeling tired, so I headed to bed a bit earlier than usual. I shut my eyes and was on the verge of falling asleep when I felt something. I felt someone staring at me, so I opened my eyes and there he was. The kid who's always getting bullied was floating mid-air in front of me and was looking down at me. I freaked out and tried to get up, but I couldn't move as if I was in sleep paralysis. But I wasn't sleeping. He disappeared after a few seconds, and I must have fallen asleep because when I woke up, it was morning. At school that day, I couldn't look at him at all because of how creeped out I felt. That night, he appeared in front of me again when I was about to fall asleep. But this time, it looked like he wanted to say something to me. Although I knew it would be pointless to ask him, I did just that when I went to school the next day. And what he told me was that he was even getting bullied in his dreams, but that I always appeared and he would proceed to ask me for help. Apparently, he felt like I would somehow save him from the nightmare he was experiencing in real life and in his dreams. I felt ashamed of myself, always choosing to ignore the incessant bullying, for turning away from him. This was the first time I actually had a conversation with him, and I noticed how ordinary the guy was, and it made me wonder what made him a target. Before I knew it, we had sort of become friends. He still appeared in front of me from time to time in the middle of the night. 2 months went by like that, and he still continued to be bullied until one day I finally decided to do something about it. I punched the bully in the face. After that, it all stopped, and it made me wish I'd done something about it a lot sooner. My classmate also stopped appearing at night. After graduating middle school, we remained friends and would talk from time to time. He seems to be a lot happier and upbeat now. Story 4. This is a story from when my husband and I were living together before we got married. I didn't feel well for a few days, so I stayed home from work thinking I might have caught a cold. One day, while I was sleeping, I experienced sleep paralysis. I convinced myself that I was just tired and waited for it to lift. Even though my eyelids were supposedly closed, for some reason I could vaguely see my surroundings. As I was wondering what the hell was going on, from the edge of my vision, I saw a black shadow slowly rising up from above my head. I was overcome with fear, but I couldn't move. And because I was seeing it even with my eyes closed, I couldn't even block it out of my vision. The shadow continued to rise higher until it was covering my face. It then reached out, and before I knew it, it was strangling me. I instinctively thought it was going to kill me, and I tried my best to break free from its grasp, but I still couldn't move a muscle. The black hand kept tightening its grip, and I was on the verge of blacking out. "Hey, wake up!" My husband was shaking me to wake me up. The sleep paralysis instantly went away, and I began crying as soon as I was freed. I was trying to tell him what had happened through my sobs when he cut me off and asked me what happened to my neck. My neck? I got up and went to look in the mirror. There were red marks around my neck. I couldn't see a handprint, but it was clearly red and irritated. It freaked me out so much that I was on the verge of hyperventilating. I asked for another 2 days off of work to allow the redness to heal. I was working in the customer service sector, and there were a few customers that I was close with. When I finally got back to work, I was having a chat with one of them when she asked, "Hey, you haven't been feeling very good lately, have you?" Considering I'd been off work for a bit, I figured she was just worried about me, so I replied with a smile, "Yeah, I think I've come down with a bad cold. Why, am I looking pale?" The customer nodded silently and said, "I'm sorry, do we have somewhere private to talk?" It wasn't every day that a customer asked something like that, so I asked the manager for permission and we walked out of the shop. She wasted no time when we got out. "There's a woman attached to you." It came so far out of left field that I didn't even know how to respond, but my heart was beating a lot faster. She didn't know that I had a boyfriend or that I had that terrifying sleep paralysis incident occur, but I decided to tell her about it because I felt like the conversation had something to do with it. When I was done, she said, "I believe you 100%. In fact, the woman's still trying to strangle you as we speak. She's been attached to you for quite some time now. You didn't notice or feel anything strange before?" My mind began spinning. I was terrified. She said to me, "Give me your hand." She took my hand, closed her eyes, and seemed to go into some kind of trance or prayer. After a few minutes, she opened her eyes. It's a bit difficult. The effects should lessen by about half." "What? What do you mean half?" "I'm sorry, I couldn't get rid of her completely. She seems to be a woman who's in love with your current boyfriend, and those feelings have taken its own shape as an Ikiryo. The woman herself has no idea this is happening. She doesn't know that her Ikiryo is attached to you and is attacking you. In a way, I feel sorry for her too because she's probably experiencing something negative herself. But of course you're the victim here. I would advise you to talk to your boyfriend about this and get him to support you through it. The Ikiryo will probably leave you once it sees that you're getting along well and are happy together. When I got home that day, I talked to my boyfriend, now my husband, about it. Apparently, there was someone he could think of. He had broken up with a girl a few years before he met me, and she began stalking him. He got fed up with it, made a new girlfriend, not me, and made his stalker ex-girlfriend give up. He apologized to me, even though it wasn't really his fault. I don't know what his ex is doing now, but nothing has happened to me since. My husband and I got married a few months later, so maybe she really did give up. The only weird thing is that every time I go get a health check, the doctors always hone in on my neck and tell me that it's inflamed. They always tell me to go get it checked by a specialist, which I do, but nothing is ever found.